I am Stephanie Bunt, and I am going to discuss a research study that considered the efficacy of homogeneity and heterogeneity in architect, engineer design teams, particularly when they are working on a collaborative design task using computational design tools. It is generally accepted that architects and engineers approach design solutions differently, and yet they collaborate on projects regularly. Research has identified that while engineers follow a linear, prescriptive design process, architects follow a more cyclical, descriptive process. To frame the design thinking of engineers, precedent research has evaluated engineering designs for how well they met certain criteria. For engineers, these criteria can be definitively and quantitatively measured. For architects, though, there's a struggle to measure their more qualitative goals. Many studies of the architectural design process are empirical and subjective to the researchers' observations and designers' feedback. Additionally, other research has identified that diverse design teams produce more creative solutions, but this occurs best when there is a conducive environment and a shared vocabulary. Often, architects and engineers work in different computational tools and use different vocabulary to discuss their design values, which may hinder the efficacy of their combined design efforts. Parametric modeling tools in both professions are increasingly being used for their ability to provide numeric feedback about design performance and allow for quick editing of a design space. They also provide a large range of design options through relatively few variables. While research suggests that working in parametric models is a viable environment for supporting design decisions, little is known about how teams might engage with the parametric tools when collaborating. To characterize the collaborations of architect, engineer, design teams when working in a shared parametric platform, this research asked if heterogeneous, or diverse, pairs of architects and engineers will produce more effective solutions compared to homogeneous, or samewise pairs of the designers when given the same design task, with equal design goals, in the same design environment. Their ability to address specific design criteria, the process they use to develop a design, and their self-awareness of their performance were examined. For the study, pairs met through an online video meeting and were briefed about the design task and the study's online tools. For their task, they were asked to develop a stadium roof design which had 4 clear criteria. 2 of the criteria spoke to architectural qualitative values, while the other 2 aligned with engineering quantitative goals. To develop their designs, they were given a link to a website built for the study, which hosted an online API program called Shapediver. Shapediver is an independent platform which allows users to access parametric aspects of a pre-made Grasshopper file without having Rhino or Grasshopper installed on their computer. During the design time, participants could edit the model using 10 parametric sliders to address the requirements of the design task. Also, the tool provided visual and numeric feedback. For their final deliverables, the team submitted 3 to 6 screenshots and a design statement, which explained their project. They also independently completed an end-of-study survey. 12 designs were produced from 12 design teams, with 4 teams from each team type. Despite never having used the tool before participating in the study, all teams were able to develop a design in the allotted time and submit the required deliverables. Initial observations of the design suggest a range of solutions in response to the design task. The intent of this research, though, is to be more than empirical in its assessment of the design teams, so more methodical methods were used to evaluate the efficacy of the team types. First, to assess the effectiveness of the teams, 4 professionals, 2 from architecture and 2 from engineering, were asked to individually assess the projects for how well the designs address the criteria of the task. The evaluation scores of not at all to extremely well were averaged for each team type for each criteria. From the professionals' evaluations, average team effectiveness in each criteria slightly reflected performance expectations of the disciplines, but the diverse teams were not significantly more effective at addressing the criteria than the homogeneous teams. Also, to document the team's verbal process, the transcripts of the design sessions were parsed to record how often the criteria were discussed throughout that session. A spike in the line represents one mention of the criterion, while a longer bar is a sustained conversation. While simply mentioning a criterion does not indicate if it was fully addressed, verbalization from participants can suggest to what extent certain criteria were considered. Generally, the team types mentioned the quantitative criteria in their transcripts and design statements more consistently than the qualitative criteria, but they did not all necessarily meet the quantitative criteria, nor were all criteria mentioned in each session. A third metric used the end-of-study survey to ask how well participants thought that their team addressed the 4 criteria of the design task. Incidentally, the architects were the most confident, while the engineers were the least. From initial observations, diversity in design teams did not correlate to more effective solutions. However, no team thoroughly addressed all the criteria, and 2 teams did not mention some of the criteria at all. In general, the team types did address the quantitative criteria more thoroughly than the qualitative criteria. This may be a result of the inherent nature of the quantitative objectives, and that their explicit numerical goals may have captured the designer's attention in a way that would not be entirely natural. Also of note, the architect teams did not noticeably exceed the other team types in meeting their criteria, despite expressing more confidence in their own performance. Even though these initial findings suggest that diverse teams of architect, engineer, designers are not notably more effective than homogeneous pairs, the research does suggest a method by which to further investigate the diverse designers' interactions. It is the intent of this research to continue to collect data in order to examine these collaborations further. Thank you.